Have you ever noticed how the strongest things in nature rarely look aggressive? Think of a tall tree in a violent storm. The wind doesn't negotiate. It arrives like a god with no patience for your plans. And yet the tree survives not by fighting the wind, but by dancing with it, bending, yielding, letting the force pass through its branches instead of snapping them. Here's the first paradox. Inner strength often looks like softness. The harder you become, the easier you break. The more you learn to bend, the more you endure. We live in a world that sells a different story. Be louder, be tougher, win, dominate. But have you ever met someone truly strong inside, someone who has walked through grief, loss, humiliation, uncertainty, and noticed how quiet they are? They don't need to prove their weight to the room. They move like a deep river, not rushing, not showing off, but unstoppable because they've accepted gravity. Strength in its mature form is not a clenched fist, it's an open hand. Let me paint a small scene. A friend of mine once told me about her worst year. Everything fell apart in a slow, cruel sequence. Her relationship, her job, her health, and then, like a final bell, her father died. She said there were mornings when she couldn't stand up, without feeling like the air itself was heavy. But something strange happened. Not in one dramatic moment, but in a long, quiet season. She stopped asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and began asking, "How do I keep my heart open while this happens?" That shift didn't remove the pain. It did something more radical. It made her bigger than it. That's what we're here to talk about. Building inner strength isn't about becoming invulnerable. It's about becoming spacious. It's about discovering a center that can be bruised without collapsing, shaken without shattering, challenged without losing its shape. The kind of strength that doesn't depend on circumstances behaving nicely. The kind that stays with you when applause disappears, when love gets complicated, when life refuses to explain itself. And maybe you're listening right now because something is already testing you. A pressure you didn't ask for, a waiting you can't control, a fear that keeps visiting at night like an uninvited guest. If so, I won't insult you with easy optimism. Life is hard. People are unpredictable. Time is indifferent. But there is a way to live inside this hardness without becoming hard yourself. So let's begin gently. Almost like stepping into cold water. Not with a battle cry, but with a question. What if the strength you're looking for isn't the ability to never fall, but the ability to fall and stay awake? What if your real power is not to prevent the storm, but to learn its language, because the storm will come. The only question is whether you'll meet it as a rigid wall or as a living tree. And the storm, if we're honest, is not always outside. Sometimes it's seated in your own chest. A thought that won't stop circling, a memory that bites without warning, a future you can't see, pressing on your ribs like a weight. We think inner strength is built by escaping these inner storms. But what if it's built by entering them? Not recklessly, not dramatically, but with the steady courage of someone walking into a dark room to turn on the light. Most of us were trained to run from discomfort, from uncertainty, from the rawness of not knowing who we are without our usual armor. We distract ourselves with noise, screens, schedules, arguments, achievements, even love. Anything to avoid sitting in the simple, frightening presence of ourselves. Yet strength is not born in the bright, managed parts of life. It is born in the caves we keep sealed. I once met an old monk on a mountain path. He was small and bent, carrying a bundle of firewood heavier than his body looked able to bear. I offered to help. He smiled and said, "If I do not carry it, how will I know I can?" Then he added something that stayed with me. The mountain does not teach you by making the way easy. It teaches you by being the mountain. The monk wasn't praising suffering for its own sake. He was pointing to a deeper truth. Difficulty is not a mistake in your life. It is a curriculum. The human heart learns endurance the way muscles learn. Strength through resistance. Not the resistance of hatred, but the resistance of weight. The kind that asks you to breathe deeper, to stabilize your footing, to discover what you're actually made of. When fear arrives, your first reflex might be to shove it away. But fear, like fire, is a strange teacher. It reveals where you cling. It shows you the edges of your courage. It asks, in a voice you can't ignore, what matters enough for you to stay? Here's another paradox. The path to inner strength is not the absence of fear, but intimacy with it. It is learning to sit beside your fear like you'd sit beside a nervous child, not obeying it, not humiliating it, just listening. I see. You say, you're trying to protect me, but I'm still here. And in that quiet conversation, something rearranges. Fear stops being a dictator and becomes a messenger. Pain stops being a prison and becomes a passage. This is what it means to meet the inner storm, to remain present when you want to evaporate, to feel the tremble in your hands and still choose the next honest step, to let grief carve you without letting it hollow you. You don't become strong by being spared. You become strong by being here fully, painfully, beautifully here while life does what life does. And once you stop running and let the weather of your inner world move through you, you begin to notice something almost shocking. What breaks most people isn't pain itself, but their war with pain, the second arrow, as the old sages like to say. Life shoots the first arrow: loss, failure, illness, betrayal, aging. The simple fact that you can't hold time still. Then we shoot ourselves with the second. This shouldn't be happening. I can't handle this. This means I'm unworthy. The first arrow hurts. The second one poisons. Inner strength is the alchemy that removes the poison, not by denying the wound, but by changing your relationship to it. Imagine a piece of iron in a forge. The fire doesn't hate the iron. The fire doesn't attack. The fire simply is what it is: hot, relentless, transformative. If the iron could speak, it might call the heat cruelty. But what the fire is doing is making the iron into something it could never become alone. The question is not whether you will be placed in the fire. The question is whether you will let the fire refine you or define you. I know, that sounds poetic, but let's translate it into human terms. Think of the times you suffered and became smaller, bitter, closed, suspicious. Now think of the times you suffered and became larger, kinder, clearer, more alive. Same ingredient, different chemistry. The difference wasn't the event. It was the way you held it. There's a story of a potter who found a cracked vessel. It was useless for carrying water across long distances. Everything leaked. But instead of throwing it away, he used it to water seeds on short walks. Over time, flowers bloomed along the path where the pot had leaked. The crack became a kind of secret generosity. Your wounds can do this too. Not automatically, not magically. But if you let them, if you stop wrapping them in shame and begin wrapping them in attention. Because attention, true attention, is the beginning of transmutation. When you bring a steady, curious awareness to your suffering, you stop being only the one who suffers. You become also the one who witnesses. And that witnessing self is wider than any single feeling. It's like discovering you are not only a wave, but the ocean that can hold waves in the wave. You drown in the ocean, you move. So when resistance rises in you, and it will try something radical, pause, feel where it lives in the body, the tightened jaw, the clenched stomach, the burning throat. Breathe into that place as if you were giving it room to speak. Ask, softly, what are you protecting? Often, beneath resistance, you'll find a frightened hope, a love that doesn't want to lose, a self that doesn't want to be humiliated. Again, resistance is not evil, it's loyal, but it doesn't always know how to lead. And here the alchemy happens. You thank the resistance for its loyalty, and then you choose a wider loyalty, to truth, to growth, to the part of you that wants to live unarmored. That is strength, not the end of struggle, but the transformation of struggle into wisdom. As that wisdom grows, you start to see how much of your suffering comes from trying to grip what was never meant to be held. We clutch at certainty, at people, at identities, at the version of life we rehearsed in our heads, and when reality doesn't match the rehearsal, our hands turn into knots. But look closely. Every time you tighten your grip, you lose something else. You lose breath. You lose range. You lose the ability to adapt. You become like a swimmer who panics in deep water and flails until they sink, forgetting that the body already knows how to float if it trusts the water. Here's another paradox. Letting go is not weakness. Letting go is the highest form of strength. Because what is strength, really, if not freedom? The freedom to meet what is, instead of demanding what isn't. The freedom to love without owning, to care without controlling, to stand in the middle of uncertainty without begging it to change clothes. We confuse control with safety, we think. If we arrange the world just right, we won't be hurt. But control is a thirsty ghost. It drinks and is never full. Even if you manage to control 100 things, the 101st will slip away. Life is not a machine you can master. It is a wild field. Sometimes it blossoms. Sometimes it burns. The great inner strength is accepting that you are not the weather maker, yet you are not powerless either. Your power is not over the field. It's within your way of walking through it. Think of love for a moment. Real love doesn't arrive with a contract. You can't guarantee someone will stay. You can't insure a heart against change, and yet, love is still worth it. Why? Because love is not a possession. It's a participation. It's a verb, not a vault. The strongest lovers are not those who cling hardest. They're the ones who can say, I want you, but I do not need to cage you. I choose you today, and I will grieve if you go, but I won't shrink my soul to keep you. That is strength. A love so alive it can survive the risk of loss. This is true not only with people, but with roles, plans, even your story about who you are. At some point, inner strength asks you to loosen your name tag, to stop treating your current self as a finished product. You are not a statue. You are a season. The oak was once an acorn. The river was once snow. Why should you be the only creature in existence not allowed to change? Letting go doesn't mean becoming careless. It means becoming elegant, like a dancer who releases tension so the movement can move through them, like a sailor who can't command the sea, but can adjust the sails. When you let go of what you cannot control, you don't fall into emptiness. You fall into life. And life, messy, honest, unpredictable life, is where your inner strength finally has space to stand. So what does this look like on a Tuesday afternoon, when nobody is watching and the bills are still due and your heart is still human? Inner strength is not built only in grand moments. It is built the way a shoreline is shaped by small waves again and again. One wave is attention, the simple practice of noticing what is happening inside you without immediately arguing with it. You don't need a monastery for this. You can do it in traffic, in the kitchen, in a meeting where your smile is polite and your nervous system is not. You pause and say, this is fear. This is jealousy. This is the ache of wanting to be seen. Naming is not fixing. Naming is seeing. And seeing is the first act of strength because it stops the unconscious from driving your life like a stolen car. Another wave is silence. Not the silence of withdrawal, but the silence of coming home. 10 minutes a day of being with yourself without input. No scrolling, no performing. Just sitting like you would sit with a friend who doesn't need entertaining. At first, silence feels like an empty room. But stay long enough and you realize it's not empty. It's full of you. Full of thoughts rising and falling like birds. Full of emotions that wanted a place to land. Silence is where your inner spine is realigned. Then there is truthful self-talk. We don't realize how often we bully ourselves in the name of motivation. But a spirit cannot grow strong in a house where it is constantly insulted. Imagine speaking to a child the way you speak to yourself when you fail. Would that child flourish, or would they curl inward, afraid of their own mistakes? Strength grows in the soil of compassion. When you stumble, you say, of course this hurts. Of course I'm learning. I can be both imperfect and worthy. That is not softness that weakens. That is softness that stabilizes. Another wave is boundaries. Many people confuse inner strength with never saying no. But a person who cannot say no will not be able to say a clean yes. Boundaries are not walls. They are the lines that protect your vitality. When you set a boundary, you are telling your life, this is where I end and you begin. You are telling your time, your energy, your love, you matter. A strong spirit is not available to everything. It is devoted to what is true. And finally, patience with time. Inner strength is a long craft. We want to fix ourselves like a software update overnight. But growth is more like gardening. You don't pull the stem to make it taller. You water, you wait, you trust the invisible. Work. Some seasons feel slow because roots are deepening. Some days you feel weak because your soul is rearranging furniture. Don't confuse discomfort with failure. These practices are not glamorous, but they are profound. Attention, silence, self-compassion, boundaries, patience done daily, imperfectly. Lovingly build a kind of inner architecture that doesn't collapse when the outer world trembles. They make you someone who can stand in the storm not as a rigid hero, but as a living home. And a home, even when shaken, still welcomes you back, and slowly, almost without you noticing, you become a place you can live in. Not because life stops being life, but because you stop abandoning yourself inside it. This is the quiet miracle of inner strength. It makes you trustworthy to your own existence. The world may still spin its roulette wheel. People may still surprise you. Your body will still age. Plans will still dissolve. Yet somewhere beneath all that movement, something in you learns to remain. The sages spoke of this in many languages. Some called it the mountain mind. Some called it the witness. Some called it the Tao, the inner way. But the taste is the same, a stillness that is not frozen, a steadiness that doesn't need to be stiff. You become like a mountain and a river. At once, the mountain, grounded, patient, unhurried by the opinions of weather. The river, flexible, responsive, willing to change shape without losing direction. If you try to be only a mountain, life will erode you into bitterness. If you try to be only a river, life will scatter you into exhaustion. Strength is the marriage of both. This is why opposites aren't enemies. They are dance partners. Courage needs humility or it becomes arrogance. Self-reliance needs belonging or it becomes isolation. Acceptance needs action or it becomes resignation. When your inner strength matures, you stop choosing one pole and rejecting the other. You learn to hold the tension like a musician holding two notes that create a chord, not a problem to solve, a harmony to inhabit. And maybe the most surprising integration is this: the stronger you become inside, the more tender you become outside, because you no longer need your tenderness to negotiate for your safety. You can be kind without being naive. You can be open without being porous. You can forgive without forgetting your worth. You can look at another person's chaos and not panic because you've met your own. Inner strength makes room for other humans to be human. So when the next storm comes, and it will, remember the tree, remember the monk with the firewood, remember the cracked pot watering flowers, remember that letting go is not falling apart, but falling into alignment. And if you find yourself shaking, don't ask, how do I become the kind of person this won't affect? Ask something truer. How do I become the kind of person who can feel this fully and still stay whole? Because wholeness doesn't mean unscarred. It means undivided. It means you stop exiling parts of yourself to survive. You gather them home, the frightened part, the grieving part, the hopeful part, the part that wants to love even after loss. You say, come with me. We're going to live this life together. Let this be your meditation as we close. Sit for a breath. Feel the ground under you. Feel the air entering your body without asking permission. Notice you are already being held by something larger than your fear. You are already part of a world that knows how to grow through seasons. Build your inner strength the way nature does, slowly, honestly, by returning to your center again and again. And one day you will notice that the storm is still real, but so are you.